Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer. And today we're going to be sort of continuing the conversation from the end of Tampa last on Thursday with the content of Tampa, but also the mess that is inside of YA literature. And this has to do with the responsibility that comes with choosing to write child's literature, children's literature. Go ahead, call me all of the names that you want. Personally, I think that you should not put children's literature. There used to be a separation for this. You shouldn't put children's literature in the same place that you put erotica, explicit erotica. And it kind of falls in the same area for me that if you are a child's teacher, you shouldn't really have an OnlyFans. Like, there are a lot of jobs that you can have where you can have two or three jobs. There's no issue. I would say working in a church or working with children and also having an OnlyFans, probably a violation because of the specific type of work that you're doing. I mean, there used to be, I feel like, a consensus that you shouldn't be overtly sexual around children, and somehow we've gotten away from that. But before we get into that, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lamai, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt. You write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creativity and uniqueness of what you guys do. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit your first chapter and your cover to the channel, they'll be read here to hopefully help more readers find your work, because they are out there. They are waiting with eager eyes and eager fingers and eager ears, whatever their preferences are, to hear your work, see your work, feel your work. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. With that said, let's get into the topic. Now, in general, every time I bring up a topic, it's just to share my thoughts, to share what I'm seeing, to sort of hopefully cultivate a conversation around the topics, because I don't think I'm right. In fact, I generally think that I'm wrong, but I think that we can maybe sort of approximate better what is going on in general by trading perspectives on things. And I also know that I have a heavy bias against sexualizing children, or even just sexual content. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy reading it. Doesn't mean other people can't. I just have a preference. That is all that is. But I also kind of get sick of people mislabeling things and then hoisting them on people. And I've seen plenty of conversations that both have to do with exposing children early to sexual content and then exposing people to sexual content that do not want to see it specifically. I don't know if this is an issue of predators. I don't know if this is an issue of people that have missed their boundaries, but one of the symptoms of child sexual abuse is that people don't understand what boundaries are. And I have seen an increased number of stories, of interactions where people assume sexual relationships that are not there. And it's one thing if you're shipping and you are enjoying shipping all on your own. It's another thing if you're turning every single relationship into a sexual relationship, period. And you can't see a meaningful relationship without it being sexual. Or consider characters that don't even meet, and your first and only thought for those characters that are in the same story because they're in the same story is that you want to see them get it on. Like, enjoy your thing. But I feel like there's something else going on here. And I feel like I'm taking crazy pills if I'm the only one looking at certain things and being like, I don't feel like this is normal. And so to piggyback on that and take us into Tampa and where Tampa comes from, where we got this story from Salon that says, Tampa and filthy sex. This year's raunchiest book has nothing on crime noir. Taboo female desire at the heart of Tampa is rare in books, but not in classic crime literature. So I have so many issues already with just that headline, because number one, it's saying crime literature is used to having pedophilic people in it. Number two, it is labeling pedophilia as just taboo female desire. I think that is heavily undermining what this actually is. It just also takes me back to freaking The Wild, where all it says is, oh, this is just a taboo book. Taboo can mean so many different things. And now this is just saying taboo sexual desire. Yeah, let's just undermine what that is. Have you read it? This asks. It was a question I was asked a dozen times earlier this summer. Every time I found myself in a bookstore, there was no ignoring the conspicuous cover, the stark chalkboard with the white scrawl Tampa dragged across it. Well, that's one version. There's another one that looks like a button that looks like a vagina. The publisher even emblazoned its galleys with a large font warning, caution, explicit content. Far more conspicuous was the twitchy, too hysterical media coverage. Too hysterical? The title might as well have been Shock. New York Observer, the sickest, most controversial book of the summer. Cosmo, the raunchiest book of the year. The filthiest book I've ever read. MSN, the explicit, raw, pornographic parody of a teacher in loco parentis. The Guardian, grimy, noted a more gimlet-eyed Kirkus, adding, for decades, transgressive fiction has traditionally been grim, male, and graphic. For those few voices asking why there aren't more women working in this swamp, this one's for you, the Washington Post concluded. Ew. So one thing that I did want to bring up, to hopefully I might forget it later in this video, but I did want to bring it up, is that this book and the author of this book brought up how there is a double standard when it comes to child predators who are female. And I would agree that there is a double standard, that it isn't recognized, but that includes in stuff like this, that women can write sexual content that is titillating, not even for the purpose of anything, but it is titillating and it is about children, and get away with it. This is not the first time that I've read it. There are so many eroticas that are written about 16, 17-year-olds, barely legal, that are written about a father or a stepfather who is grooming his 14-year-old child. A lot of women actually apparently see no issue with teenagers being groomed by older men as as young. There was somebody that I know from, I remember hearing about somebody else who was writing a book where the character was 14 and got into this role of servitude and submission, and it was meant to be a romance. This character starts out as 13, 14, and then I was told that it's okay that she gets into this relationship with this older man who is her superior, who she is a slave to for 5 years, because they only get together after she's 18. As if that's not grooming. As if there is not grooming involved with picking at a teenage girl who is finding herself, who is looking to adults for attention. And then you've got stuff that's like Paper Princess, that is about freaking 17-year-old stripper in a situation where she goes to live with her new step-siblings, and all of her step-siblings want to have sex with her all the time, and that's what the story is, and it's sold with a YA or middle grade style cover, but it is literally a pornography setup. And so women actually get away with writing a lot of sexual content that is then sold to or given to children. And it is very much ignored that women are giving sexually explicit content to children. That includes ACOTAR. That includes people admitting that they are writing sexually explicit content that you would normally not just put in front of children. Like, there used to be a packaging, there used to be a process to not specifically hand it to children. And now instead we got women that are bragging about handing sexually explicit content to children and bragging that this is liberation. This is women's power, to hand children sexual content. And I don't really understand it, but that is part of the double standard, is this book that sexualizes children and makes them into sexual objects to make its point is okay because it was written by a woman and it's about a female character. Flip it the other way, it wouldn't have been published. Prove me wrong, because men get in trouble for far less. So what is this? Sexual predatory behavior happens with men and women predators, but it looks different sometimes. And then it is defended publicly different sometimes. And this, it is calling it hysterical to point out, hey, this was pornographic. Now, if you didn't watch the video for Tampa, I highly recommend that you do, or go and read the book for yourself, and then let me know what you think about it, because I think it crossed the line of appropriateness, but at least it is not YA. I can at least give it that. Is it really as dirty as they say? I finally asked Sarah Weinman of Publishers Market. She looked at me and smiled. Only to people who don't read crime novels. I would like to ask anybody who is aware of or knowledgeable on Tampa, do you really think that's a fair comparison? Because I don't think it is. The comment lingering in my head when I finally began Tampa, the debut novel of short story writer Alyssa Nutting. Inspired by a real-life case, the story centers on Celeste Price, the serial predator of teenage boys who uses her job as a middle school teacher to initiate an affair with a 14-year-old student with catastrophic results. Celeste's first-person narration depicts the ceaseless energy of her predations and her remorseless, amoral response to the havoc that ensues. Interestingly, despite the fact that its subject is essentially predator sex, the shivers and shocks the book seems less focused on the fact that we are, by most measures, reading salacious descriptions of acts of molestation than in the relentless and emotionless quality of Celeste's sexual appetite. But all of those headlines up there are talking about how it's nasty, and it's saying that the most shocking thing that it had people responding to was the fact that Celeste doesn't have emotions. I'm gonna need a fact check on that, because what? Beginning with the opening set piece of classroom masturbation of gymnastic proportions, the novel's perpetual focus is Celeste's rapacious hunger. Virtually all her waking thoughts are ruled by her insatiable sexual predilection. Her insatiable sexual predilection. She can never be satisfied, and her desire rules her life. Taboo female desire is far from an unheard of topic in fiction, but apparently it still has the power to alarm and outrage. To feel itself is transgressive. Now, this is an issue that I take with this article and why I wanted to bring it up, because we're dealing with pedophilia here, and the author of this article is acting like the only thing that is outrageous about this book is that a female character would be have this unending sexual appetite. The fact that she has an unending sexual appetite is not the thing that makes it stand out, and maybe it's because I've been ruined by looking at so many dark romances, just not even looking at, having the knowledge that they exist. So many dark romances out there that are just non-stop porn fests. There is no shame among the writing community of women writing insatiable sexual appetites. The books are there. The genre is there. It is an insanely popular genre, whether it is read because people want to see how ridiculous it gets, because they get sexual pleasure out of reading it, because of their own predations. There is a very popular subsection of readers for erotica and dark romance specifically. So the fact that this tries to label pedophilia as just a taboo sexual woman feeling feeling unapologetic for her sexuality, and that is what offends people, that is what is transgressive because a woman is sexual, what? That is ridiculous. That is minimizing the conversation from what is actually not even just the problem here, but what the author specifically said she wrote the story for. So then you have to wonder, Salon, are you the one that is covering for the pedophilia, or is it the author? There is, however, a place where such desire does not flicker in the margins, but instead forms the spine of the genre, specifically within the noir tradition in crime fiction. I'm going to need some fact checks. I don't write specifically crime fiction, so anybody who is a crime fiction aficionado, you're going to have to tell me. I know that there is going to be some salaciousness in some crime fiction, but is it really what Tampa was? From the tabloid tales of James M. Cain through Jim Thompson's deranged heroes all the way through the Joe Nesbo's Harry Hole series, noir is the terrain where compulsive behavior, characters who cannot stop themselves or restrain even their most taboo desires is the subject, is in fact the expectation. I did read XXX Seamus, which was a sort of satire on that genre, the noir genre, with the guy who is just like nonstop having sex and he gets worn out and he is a sex addict and it's seen as sex addiction, even has sex with his sister and he doesn't want to have sex with his sister, but he can't stop himself, so then he tries to hire an assassination to get her killed, and then he feels bad, so then he goes and saves her from the assassination because he doesn't want that ending for her. It's a whole thing. Nobody else has suffered XXX Seamus, as far as I know, and I just live with that. So if that's true, then maybe it's much more prevalent in noir than I think, but I didn't think that noir was specifically a version of erotica. I thought noir was mostly crime solving. Such behavior, or the longing that drives it, is the engine of the plot. It is a genre foremost focused on the elemental drives: desire, greed, hunger, rage, longing. Stories then stem from the way these elements can take over one's life, becoming the drum beat or the funeral beat to life. Characters are ruled by the circuit of wanting, needing, getting, wanting again. Addiction and compulsion don't just call to action, they demand it. Often there's guilt over it, but sometimes, as in the darker corners of noir, the characters have surrendered to it, like Jim Thompson's centerless heroes never fought it at all. They've embraced it. Tampa falls squarely in this latter tradition, with each sexual episode this way, that way, on the desk, on the sink, in the car, alone or partnered, real or fantasy, emanating from the drive, I can't stop myself, why would I want to? I find it completely disingenuous to compare desires for like money or murder or jealousy to erotica and sex to the extent that Tampa was. I don't think that it is a comparison, because there's also not as much general description, as far as I'm aware, in noir when it comes to the crimes or what drives the crimes and there's more of a plot because you're actually solving something. But again, my noir and crime viewers, readers, let me know what your thoughts are, because I don't believe that I have the full picture, and I think that other people can bring in their expertise to help fill in this conversation. But I don't feel like this article is being honest. Perhaps the greatest signal of how comfortable Tampa fits within the genre is its affinity for another Florida tale of a sexually out-of-control woman, taboo breaking, and crime, Miami Purity, by Vicki Hendricks. The novelist J. David Gonzalez recently dubbed the most macabre mistress to ever pen Florida crime fiction. For noir enthusiasts, Miami Purity remains the paradigmatic text of female sexual hunger, and as with Tampa, it is an openly declared gender reversal of classic texts. Tampa's publisher has tirelessly promoted Celeste as the female Humbert Humbert, a comparison Nutting herself has encouraged in interviews. I don't think that they are comparable. Likewise, Hendricks' novel is modeled after James M. Cain's quintessential noir novel, The Postman Always Rings Twice, the book that launched countless tales of unmoored men who, in sexual thralls to femme fatale, plunge headlong into murder. In Miami Purity, Cain's drifter-turned-murderer is swept for a drifter-murderess with a lonely wife turned femme fatale, replaced by a dubious son turned homme fatale. Like Cain's paradigmatic heroes, Hendricks' Cherry Parlay is burdened by the troubled past and desperate for work. A former stripper, she wants more from her life than puppeting bleached peach around in the back light for money. Instead, a new job working for a dry cleaner and her handsome son embroils her in a noir classic of money and sex triangle. As with Cain's hero, however, material gain is never Sherry's motivator. Instead, her sexual hunger thrums through the novel. Her bodily desire is overwhelming, primarily desire for her lover, but occasionally even extending to a fleeting erotic encounter with an accommodating dog, and an uncontrollable, as befits the classic Cain, tradition. She cannot help herself. So one of the things that I'm seeing as these just taboo female desires are everything that is like fringe. And then they go, it's just female desire. It's just female desire. Is this trying to say that this is what normal female sexual desire is, and so it's taboo, and that's, females wanting sex is so bizarre, is so over the top that it is freaking people out. And then it goes, but these women are like banging animals and children. It feels like a really weird juxtaposition to not just accept that this is fringe, that this is bizarre. And I don't understand why there is that lack of understanding of the boundary, that the thing is not female desire. And you kind of water down and paint every female with the same brush when you say that it is only because of female sexual desire that it is taboo when you're talking about having sex with a dog. Tampa, too, bears the marks of Cain from its taboo subject. Miami Purity also dabbles in incest, to Celeste's dark sexual free-for-all straight through the courtroom trial media circus and last-minute Hail Mary via a wily attorney in the novel's final pages. That voraciousness is the spine of both novels, and reading them side by side, the similarities shimmer forth. Quote, I'd never be able to make it in prison. There's no oxygen for the affliction that burned inside me, Tampa. Doing it was the only thing that took my mind off wanting it, and a short time later, the need would only be stronger. Sexual heat was always a permanent in me, no escaping it. Can we just acknowledge these are probably actually just dark romances? Let's be like, I think we need a new category. We need a new genre. I'm not for creating new genres, but we need a new genre that is just... I don't know what to do. The hunger is the very thing that gives these women life. Both have accepted it. But because this is noir, I don't think it's noir. Hunger carries a heavy price. Unable to control her drives, Sherry is doomed to the classic noir role of sap. Unlike Tampa's heroine, Sherry's weakness is that she is confused by love. Celeste's fate is far less dim. Unburdened by emotional attachment, she lands on her feet. Instead of noir chill at the novel's ending lies with us, closing the final pages with a queasy awareness that Celeste will just keep on going and doing what she's doing. In this way, Celeste shares common ground with a different kind of transgressive female character, Gone Girl's Amy. Both women are not so much human as they as a drive embodied. Celeste's desire in Celeste's case, rage in Amy's. The result in Tampa is that we are able to keep a comfortable distance, to judge Celeste, even to laugh at or with her, without her feeling complicit or emotionally entangled. Without ever feeling complicit or emotionally entangled with her or her victims. I never laughed with her. I didn't find anything about that book funny. I found it mostly sickening. Victim is an important word here. Indeed. A key difference between Tampa and Miami Purity is the choice of the sexual taboo. In Miami Purity, the sex may lead to a crime, but in Tampa, the sex itself is criminal. But just as Tampa avoids deeper questions about Celeste or the society that helped create her by rendering her as essentially a hollow maw devoid of self-reflection, much less guilt, it also skirts the moral implications of Celeste's predation. This deflection is less common in noir, which is in many ways a genre obsessed with failed morality and guilt. That's kind of, as far as I'm aware, that's what makes something noir. That is an important element of noir. So if you take that out, then it can't be noir. If you take out the examination or the questions relating to morality and guilt, then it can't be that thing. That's like going, well, this is a fantasy, but it has zero fantasy elements in it, but it is a fantasy. Instead, Tampa's graphic sex scenes expertly skirt their status as molestation episodes. I would not say so. Go read that book for yourself or watch the review to tell me what you think. Because I don't think that it skirted status as molestation episodes. It was creepy the second she asked Jack to stay behind in the classroom and then was like, tell me what lipstick you want me to wear, child. Presumably, this is because we are bound to Celeste's point of view, and she herself does not traffic in such concerns. Am I supposed to not question her actions because I'm in her perspective? Because you know what? I do. But to entertain the Lolita analogy, consider the way that Nabokov forces our awareness of Alita's plight, such as when we witness her physical discomfort after her deflowering at Humbert's hands, or when Humbert looks at her and is struck by an oppressive, hideous constraint as if I were sitting with a small ghost of somebody I had just killed. We are compelled to remember time and time again what Humbert has really done with a child. With Tampa, however, we can put our moral outrage to one side while tittering behind our hands at the dirty sex scenes. I am very uncomfortable with this author. Show me the readers that put aside the moral outrage that comes with molesting and raping children. Who that? Raise your hand in the chat, please. Am I just that disconnected that you are the weird one if you don't put aside being morally disgusted by an adult raping children? Is that really where the normal is not at anymore? We can call it raunch because we are not calling it molestation. It's rape. And we are not calling it molestation because Celeste is female and her student is male. This shows more of the bias of the author of this article than of anything else. As Maggie Shipstead writes in the New Republic, Tampa is a product of a double standard it criticizes. With the genders reversed but the raunchy content preserved, Tampa would never have been published, at least not by HarperCollins. Indeed, once one folds gender back into the equation, the picture gets murky. While we may see Tampa fit more snugly, if not precisely, within noir, fact check, please. We do have to ask, is noir really a terrain considerably more comfortable with female transgression? After all, what does that mean that both Tampa and Miami Purity are essentially riffs on seminal male texts? Is their raunchiness acceptable because they are books less about women than about male books? Can one even imagine a gender reversal that began with a seminal female text? The only I can think of would be Entourage, the male Sex and the City, though the comparison seems to be designed as big as both TV enterprises. At heart, noir is essentially a male tradition, and while Miami Purity predates Tampa by many years, it's telling that it remains nearly 20 years since its publication a primary go-to novel when one talks about uncontained female-centered desire. As it turns out, even in noir, a genre rooted in lust gone amok, we still rarely see female characters blazing with a kind of compulsive and single-minded sexual activity that is nearly elemental to male noir protagonists, from Jim Thompson to David Goodis to Lawrence Block and James Elroy Hendricks, whose other novels include Iguana Love and Cruel Poetry, continue to pulse the same bold intensity, remains a bold outlier. That's because they are all in dark romance. Okay? Because the dark romance often has the crime element of some kind, because it's typically touching on dark subject matter, and it has all of the sex, and it has a lot of the sexual preoccupation, sexual predation. I think that what is happening here is, one, it's somebody who doesn't understand what genres are, what the categorization is for genres. And then two, noir has an audience. So you're going to create things that fit for the audience that exists, because what genres are labels for the group of people that read those things. What dark romance is. It would be interesting to see if noir readers would enjoy reading dark romance, and if dark romance readers would enjoy reading noir. Like, that would be an interesting study of some kind. So what truly is the source of our discomfort here? The fact that this novel, the fact that this article has to ask that and cannot just be like, it is molesting children in sexual depravity with very descriptive content, pornographic content of children. What is the taboo? With both novels, it does not seem to be the queasiness over female sexual explicitness or even bald female sexual hunger. Instead, it's female sexual compulsion that seems to be so unnerving to readers. Sexual compulsion of any kind is unnerving because it ruins your life. Sex addiction is a real thing, and it does ruin your life, no matter if you're male or female. Celeste's every act is ruled by her sexual desire, for which she feels no shame or guilt, only a desire to repeat it. Nothing can stop her, and she has no desire to stop herself. At heart, compulsive behavior among women feels more troubling, more alien. What is acceptable or even accepted among male characters is unnerving other when attached to our female protagonist. Okay, this is, again, another double standard of this author, of this writer, whatever, saying that it's more permissible if men are sexual addicts. And it's not. It's just you saying that you don't care about male victims of sexual addiction, that you don't examine it the same way, and that is only people fearing female sexual hunger, female sexual desire, rather than the issue that is sexual addiction. For all the cultural stereotypes that bind women with emotion and men with logic, perhaps we fundamentally expect women to behave more rationally, to be more in control of their bodies and desires than men, or to behave emotionally but for love. They teeter off the righteous path. They may even veer wildly from a path of conventional morality, but their motives are explicable. Love, money, revenge. But what do we do with a woman who's gotta have it, no matter how inappropriate her particular object of desire is, and then has it again and again and again, regardless of the consequences? What if there are, as in Tampa, no consequences? How do we solve a problem like Celeste, a new breed of femme fatale? I also find it offensive that it's calling a child predator a femme fatale. That is a choice, Megan. But I would argue it is not because people are uncomfortable with female sexual desire. Personally, from all of the content that I've read in the last couple of years, specifically regarding the ALA books and like popular books like ACOTAR, I feel sexually harassed by authors that are just thrusting stuff at me. Even in books that are not specifically marked for stuff. Now, whatever. If sex shows up in a book, it's fine. Whatever. It's showing up in children's books. It's showing up as compulsively, as obsessively as it does, like in Guns and Smoke, where everything is about sex. I saw a book review the other day that it was some sort of, the person described it as like a Greek thing. It was another Fae thing. I was like, that looks like a ACOTAR knockoff. And she was like, the climax is the climax, basically. Every single page reminds you that the point of the story is, when are they going to have sex? When are they going to have sex? And they only have sex once. It's all the way at the end of the climax is the climax. But it reminds you that that is the climax. And it's the same thing for Guns and Smoke, and it's the same thing for the sequel to Guns and Smoke, and it's the same thing for a lot of these books, where it carries out the sexual obsession and the thirst all the way to the end. And then it says your only problem with it is because you're having to look at female sexuality and you have a problem with it. And it's like, no, you can like what you like. Maybe it's just because I got no sexual drive like this at all in my body. And so I just do not understand this predilection, this obsession. But then it becomes an insult that you are broken or you are weird if you don't have this. And then, oh, you're only afraid of female sexual desire. No. You're dismissing the fact that this is, preying on children. And it wouldn't be seen any different. It would be seen very, very differently if it was an adult man handing a 14-year-old a pornographic video. Women do get away with things, with child sexual predator impulses, with Stories that romanticize grooming constantly. They make up so much of the market that is romance, that is YA, and that's where I want to get into this. Lots of cursing and sex. Authors Laurel K. Hamilton and Sarah J. Maas on pleasure and violence and paranormal romance. Now, technically, Sarah J. Maas is not a YA author because initially her books were not written as YA. According to this article, she was offered to sell her books as YA because they would sell better as YA from the way that they were written, but she argued that they had to leave the sex in. So she agreed. According to this article, she agreed to sell her books to children in the YA section as long as the sex was there. Tell me why that behavior is okay. Why are corporations then, who are put in place to control these books, to control these genres, allowing that to happen? What happens when two paranormal romance authors sit down to chat? The conversation revolves around three themes: sex, fantasy, and hot male characters. Both Laurel K. Hamilton and Sarah J. Maas are no strangers to these topics and don't shy away from going into detail. Now, the other question here is, Tampa came out in 2013. Then we've got this, where there has been quite the world of a difference between 2013 and now, even between Twilight and now, because in Twilight, which was one of the more popular teen stories in the mid-2000s, they didn't have a sexual relationship until Bella and Edward were married. I don't remember much of the Twilight saga. I only read the first two books when I was a teenager, and then I got bored, because that's what I do. So I can't follow how it's changed in the last 20 years. But it feels so different to be saying that females and female literature is ashamed of being sexual when I don't feel like it really is. It's like all over the place. And I go on social media and I see people bragging about putting smut in their books. So I just don't see it. Am I just daft? Because I feel like I experience a lot of it. As their New York Comic-Con 2019 panel began, Laurel K. Hamilton, author of the popular Anita Blake series, admitted that she wasn't familiar with Sarah J. Maas before being asked to read the panel, and doesn't read YA fiction, but read Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses series with her husband as a little book club. Hamilton remarked that Maas's books being shelved as young adult felt like a mislabeling because the not-so-young adult section would have been better, and that she had no idea that young adults had exploded like that. So even her cohort 5 years ago said, this didn't feel like a YA because of what was in it. Maas agreed and said that we are now in the golden age of YA thanks to Twilight and the Hunger Games, but that ACOTAR does skew a lot older, like 35, let's be real. She was surprised that it was shelved YA, especially considering that there are 3-day sex marathons in one of the books, A Court of Mist and Fury. This discussion around Sarah J. Maas's books isn't new. Often the term new adult comes up in reference to her work, but Maas mentions that new adult categorization hadn't really caught on the way that publishers hoped it would. She agreed to publish ACOTAR as YA as long as the editor wouldn't censor any of the sexual content. Her new series, Crescent City, is being marketed as adult from the get-go, as Maas says, because the word fuck appears on almost every single page. She joked that her editorial process included a lot of removals of the F-bombs. I went a little overboard. I had to tone it down to make the F-bombs really pop. And Maas never shied away from adult language, so much so that a reader once gave her a mug with the word fuck on it. Laurel K. Hamilton shared that readers had once given her a hand-knitted F-bomb and that Anita Blake cusses like a sailor because I do. She joked that she knows a day has gone by when she's trying to think of a new way to say fuck. She commiserates with Sarah because her Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series is sometimes shelved as young adult. She thinks that because of her strong female character, but that the violent content wouldn't have suited the YA category at the time the book was published, before YA was wild and free. The fact that YA is considered wild and free, like they are having this open conversation about how YA is not for children. I want to know what they would describe YA as now, if it is considered wild and free and you just anything. Hamilton admits that this has sometimes been an issue with younger readers and their parents, and that she does get asked if her books are appropriate for teenage girls. Her response is that it's particular to each reader, and if that 15-year-old is mature enough, then the books are appropriate for them. And I would like to recategorize this discussion and have an adult tell somebody that you are a mature 15-year-old. Have any other adult unrelated to that child say you are a mature 15-year-old. Here is some adult content. Because am I the only one that just does not feel like something is right here? Mass has had similar experiences and shared an anecdote of a young fan who wore a shirt that said "It's all about the wingspan" with an image of wings and rulers on the back. Mass laughed and felt like it was a little inappropriate, but if a reader understands and can handle that content, it works. And that she is reading adult fantasy at that age, and that she was reading adult fantasy at that age. Two things here. One, if a 13-year-old is wearing a shirt that's a dick joke, inappropriate. Call me a church lady. I don't think a 13-year-old needs to be wearing a dick joke around a bunch of adults. Two, Sarah J. Maas. Were the adult fantasy novels full of sexual content when you were a child? Like, I get really annoyed that some people assume that if you say adult content, that it means not safe for work, it means sex, it means smut, because people will assume that if it's an adult space, then it needs to be sexualized, and it must be sex. If they put sex in it, then it is no longer a YA. That is what I heard around the conversation with His Name is Augustin, is that a graphic anal sex rape was put in the first book specifically to try to boost it out of feeling like a YA, where it still feels like a YA, but now it's just a YA with a graphic anal sex rape in it. And there's this assumption that if you put sex in it, then it is suddenly an adult book. And so then it's saying, well, I was reading adult fantasy at that time. Not all adult fantasies have sex in them. As far as I am aware, Brandon Sanderson does not write explicit sex in his books. So that just annoys me. Hamilton was impressed by Mass's reaction to her fans. Quote, "There was no adult fantasy like that when I was 13. I wrote it. I cracked that egg open." So then that's her saying the adult fantasy when she was a teenager that she read was not like the stuff that she reads now. And then she's still using that as a scapegoat of, well, I was reading adult fantasy. So you're slipping adult content into a place where it wasn't before and then handing it to children and then saying, well, I was reading that when I was a kid. That's not what I get from this. Often, the sexual content bothered her as a reader more than the violence, so as a writer, she knows that the sexual content has to be done with just as much care as the violence or mystery. Hamilton admitted that readers and journalists were bothered by her work because it was female character written from a first-person perspective. Oh my gosh. Can we not? I get so pissed off at this. Look, Joey is a female character written by a female author from a first-person perspective. I hate when "but I'm female" is used as an excuse. Sometimes there is a problem. Sometimes people are assholes. I've seen it. I'm not trying to disagree with that. But then when you say, hey, this is pornography in a kid's book, I have a problem with this. They go, it's because I'm female. They did the same thing with Tampa. It's because she's female and you're afraid of female sexual desire. No, I don't like reading graphic pornography about a woman banging 14-year-olds. Is that so hard to understand? It's not because it's a female. It's not because it's first person. I love first person. I get to listen to people shit on first person all the time. I love first person, okay? I write in it a lot. Journalists have admitted to her that they wouldn't be as bothered if it were written by a man with this, if a man were writing the same question, which spurs Hamilton onto her writing. She is tired of having to defend women in her books enjoying sex and their sexualities, and that she wishes that it was a non-question. Mass agreed and mentions that fantasy books that she read with sex as a young woman were her introductions to sex and sexuality. Finding heroines that enjoyed having sex and weren't afraid left a huge mark on her as a woman and as a writer. It is really important for her stories to show that sex is okay and that female characters enjoy it just as much as male characters do. That's also funny considering how much manipulation and gaslighting and abusive relationships are in Sarah J. Maas's stories. It left a huge impact on her and told her a lot about how to respond to sex. And so then she's going to write a bunch of books, sell those books to teenagers about abusive relationships that are then going to influence teenagers to get into abusive situations and not know it. I mean, I don't like to put that on authors, but is that what I'm being told here? There is a responsibility. Am I crazy in saying that I think that there is a responsibility to authors and publishers that are going to put something under the YA banner or under something that is meant for children? Because, like, if you're writing for adults, whatever, have at it. Do whatever you want. Children are still establishing boundaries, understanding each other, understanding the world. Is it too much to say that you should maybe try to be a little bit responsible when you're writing children's literature? Hamilton noted that there's probably more police work and violent crime in her books than sexual content, but the more it was brought up as a problem, the more she wanted to write sex to balance the scales. Her characters, I freaking hate spite writing so much. Mary Gentry was created for this purpose, and it isn't as bothered by casual sex as Anita Blake. She introduced a character just to put more sex in there because people commented on the sex over the crime. Look, here is the direction to consider it as. The young readers that you have are not going to try to copy your crimes. They might take cues off of your characters who are having sex because that is achievable in their lives. It's making me sick, honestly. Hamilton joked that her romantic lead vampire, Jean-Claude, would be upset about this. I apologize for contributing to the problem of romantic vampires everywhere. I apologize to my imaginary friend for making his dating life hard. Both Hamilton and Mass related to talking with their characters as if they were real. Mass admitted to getting emotional and sobbing so hard, tears are drenching her keyboard. Mass was firm that these are real emotions and that our characters are pieces of her. Hamilton agreed and shared that Jean-Claude was the longest running male relationship in her life, and she started writing him before she met her husband. Hamilton shared that Anita Blake's character came from wanting to counteract detective fiction where male characters got to cuss and have casual sex, and if they killed someone, they defended themselves. Female characters weren't treated the same way, and Hamilton wanted to even the playing field. She wanted to create a female character that could hold her own with the big boys and feel that they have success on that one. The audience absolutely agreed. This is exactly the same thing that the Salon article was saying about Tampa, is that, oh, we need to make a female sexual predator who has an unsatiable appetite because males exist in noir. Look, if you want to write sex, but like, I'm getting tired of it being treated as an empowering thing. I don't think that it is helpful, especially to just passively be like, well, you only care because it's this, and then marking off everybody with some sort of label to then say that it is empowering, and if you disagree, then you are the problem. Also to sell it to children. Like, they block their criticisms with, well, you're just afraid of women and sexuality. You're just writing out of spite. You admitted that you added a character because of complaints. You're writing out of spite. And then they just talk about their next thing. Women get away with writing pornography, writing sexually explicit content, and then marketing it specifically to children. And she talks about, Sarah J. Maas in this article said she talked about how sex and sexuality in teen literature had an impact on her. And then you think of how many people are focusing on sexuality and relationships in stories. But then you also look at this. Why would you say that I need to show children this? This needs to, knowing that it would have an effect. Because then you go, I'm not going to read this whole article, but I did want to give this example. Let me move this over a little more so you can see it better. Sexual violence in teen fiction, an in-depth analysis to ACOTAR. And you get in here, and there is just so much between the way that Rysand acts and the way that Tamlin is treated and the way that Feyre is treated and the responses that Feyre has. And this article says that Sarah J. Maas has even said she has zero interest in psychology. So she's acting with all of these things of manipulation, of abuse, where like in the first book with ACOTAR, where you've got Feyre who is starving and cold and dying, her arm twisted behind her back, and Rysand is making her make a deal with him so she doesn't die, so she gets fed. And now she is basically his servant because she's got this tattoo on her that he can see through, that he can feel and read her emotions through, that he can mentally read her mind through. And that's going to be a control thing that he has for the rest of forever. As she is in this dungeon, as she is awaiting to do the trials once a month on the full moon, she is brought out of the dungeon that she is starving in, taken to the Fae party, gotten super drunk, and Rysand has her dancing on him. And then in the second book, he said, I did it out of love for you. I just didn't want you to suffer, so I sexually harassed you every day. There is so much in there. And you have to take it back to Sarah J. Maas saying she learned from the expressions of sex and sexuality in books that she read as a teen. So what does this mean? So this just... I don't really know what I'm trying to get at here. I just wanted to bring these ideas forward to discuss these different things, to discuss sexuality in books and the things that get away, that are pushed into books. And I think that there is a place, obviously self-expression of different kinds, but I think that stuff that is tailored to children, that is targeted to children, has a different responsibility than stuff that is made for adults. And I don't think that like, is that a controversial take, that things made for children should be different than things made for adults? That children shouldn't be treated like adults because they don't think like adults? And I almost wonder how much of this is like an inability for some adults that may have a sort of arrested development or don't really understand that teenagers don't think like them. I don't really know. but I'm wondering what is causing this over-sexualization and these lines that are constantly being crossed with sexualizing teenagers, both in fiction and outside of fiction. Because you have stuff like this, you have stuff like Tampa, where this is no big deal, where you're only disliking this because it is a female sexuality, not because the content is actually, I could care less about all of the dark romance. I don't read that genre because I have no interest in it. If that is your jam, I hope that you have the greatest jam of all time. Tampa is not sold like that. Then I look at stuff like Paper Princess, which is YA, which is also not sold like dark romance, even though it probably should be. And so I'm looking at stuff that I feel like is being mismarketed, that is being mislabeled, and then is being sold to the wrong people, and those wrong people are children. Then I see stuff like the TikTok discussion that I had with Effie Does Books about there was that whole thing with hockey and with motorcycle dudes in romance and erotica novels, and then these adult women jumping on telling this teenager to read all of these dark romances. And I think I'm just trying to understand how, like, what is going on. I think that's really what it comes down to. So I'm sorry if this is just so all over the place, because I'm trying to compile all of this stuff, and I'm trying to put it in its proper places, because I think ACOTAR has a place. It's just not marked for YA. It's not marked for teenagers. But like, how are the boundaries being erased so much for children and so much for teenagers? And I think it was the most vulnerable time for teenagers to be groomed is like between 12 and 14, I think it was. 11 and 14, something like that. Which is where a lot of these characters are then molested and groomed in these stories. And some of them, you can't even tell the difference between if they're supposed to be horror shows, satire, or romance, because some of them are written as romance. And then it's like, well, that's not really a problem. And then you're told, well, this is just a fantasy, so don't think about it. But then you've got the absolute horror show, and they're not the same thing. But then you've got adult women harassing children, or harassing teenagers, and don't understand the line of sexual harassment. So I don't really know. I don't really know where I'm trying to get with any of this. But it felt conducive. I just think that the sexual content in teenager books is getting out of whack, especially if you look at some of the biggest people in that genre, which Sarah J. Maas was a huge YA author until they moved ACOTAR out of YA back into adults because people caught on to the content. And these people calling it wild and free genre, I think that there's a problem. And I mentioned this before in talking about YA not being for kids anymore, not being for teens anymore. And I don't know what to do, but I feel like it's changing the way people think in a bad way. It's erasing these lines that I don't think that there was as much dispute about before. But I don't know if I'm getting the full picture. So I wanted to present to you my thoughts on these things. I still think Tampa could have been a better book, but I think it ends up being a difficult book to actually respond to, because if you say, hey, I think this was poorly written and these are where you could make it better, it becomes well, you just want to remove the sexuality because you're afraid of female sexuality. And it's no, but I don't think that it is conductive to telling the story that you're trying to tell. I think that it is more a self-fulfillment or an attempt to be offensive than it is to actual effective storytelling. But that's always going to be a difference in personal taste in putting a story together. And that's really what that is at the end of the day. But for the over-sexualization of teenagers, I just am trying to figure out what this is. Because I don't think I have I don't think I have the capability of fully understanding it because of what my perspective is. So let me know what your thoughts are on any and all of these subjects, on these articles, on these books, down in the comments below. No shame to whatever genre you enjoy reading. That's why they all exist. That's why there are so many different types of writers. And personal preference does not dictate what your preferences are, what your enjoyments are, or what you are allowed to love or dislike or feel, whatever, what have you. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?